I've never been one to take shortcuts in the kitchen. 43 years of baking taught me that the best bread comes from patience, the finest pastries from precision, and the sweetest success from honest work. It's a lesson I learned from my grandmother, passed down to my late husband Robert, and one I thought I'd pass to the next generation. That belief was tested the day I came home early from the farmer's market to find my niece laughing in my kitchen while going through my recipe journals, the ones Robert and I spent decades perfecting. Before I tell you what happened that October afternoon, I need to ask you something. Please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Twisted MNT Stories. Your support means everything to me. I'm Margaret Dawson, 65 years old, and I've been running Dawson's Daily Bread in the small town of Ashford, Oregon for the past 38 years. Robert and I started the bakery with nothing but a small business loan, my grandmother's sourdough starter that was older than me, and a dream of creating something that would outlast us both. He passed 5 years ago from a heart attack, sudden and devastating, leaving me alone with the ovens we'd fired together every morning since 1986. The bakery sits on Main Street, a 2-story brick building with our apartment upstairs. It's modest, nothing fancy, but every brick was paid for with flour-dusted hands and early mornings. The display cases hold the breads and pastries that made us local legends: rosemary focaccia, cinnamon rolls the size of dinner plates, and the blackberry hand pies that won us the State Fair ribbon 6 years running. That particular Saturday, I'd planned to spend the whole day at the farmer's market, selling our weekend specials and stocking up on fresh berries from the Peterson farm. But Mrs. Peterson called me around noon to say she'd be closing early due to a family emergency, so I packed up my booth 3 hours ahead of schedule. As I drove back through Ashford's quiet streets, past the old movie theater and the library where Robert and I had our first date, I felt that familiar mix of gratitude and loneliness. The town had been good to us, supported our business through recessions and changing tastes, but coming home to an empty apartment never got easier. That's when I noticed the silver Audi parked in front of my bakery. I didn't recognize it. We closed at 2 on Saturdays, and I'd locked everything up myself that morning before leaving. My heartbeat quickened as I pulled into the alley behind the building. I could hear voices as soon as I entered through the back door. Laughter, actually. A woman's voice I half recognized, and a man's deeper laugh. They were in my kitchen, the sacred space where Robert and I had created magic every single morning. I moved quietly through the hallway, my market bag still on my shoulder. The office door was open, and that's when I saw her. Emily, my brother David's daughter, sitting at my desk with my recipe journals spread out in front of her. The journals, Robert's handwriting mixed with mine, decades of refinements and secrets, including the sourdough starter ratios that made our bread legendary. Next to her stood a man I'd never seen before, tall and too handsome in that slick way that made me instantly distrust him. He was photographing the pages with his phone. "Aunt Margaret," Emily said, when she finally noticed me, not even having the decency to look embarrassed. "You're back early." "I could say the same about you," I replied, setting down my bag carefully. "I haven't seen you in 3 years? And suddenly you're in my locked bakery, going through my private journals?" The man smiled, extending his hand. "Mrs. Dawson, I'm Brandon Mitchell, Emily's fiancé. We've heard so much about you." I didn't take his hand. "That's funny, because I've heard absolutely nothing about you. Emily, how did you get in here?" She held up a key, the brass catching the afternoon light. "Dad gave me his spare. He thought you might need help, you know, given your age and everything. Running a business alone at 65 must be so exhausting." My brother David lived in Seattle, visited maybe twice a year, and hadn't set foot in the bakery since Robert's funeral. The idea that he'd given Emily a key without telling me made my blood run cold. "What exactly are you doing with my recipes?" I asked, moving closer to the desk. Brandon answered before Emily could. "Actually, Mrs. Dawson, we're here to discuss a business proposition. You see, I work in publishing, cookbook division, and Emily mentioned that you have some rather unique recipes here. Traditional methods, family secrets, that sort of thing. Very marketable in today's artisanal food market." "My recipes aren't for sale," I said flatly. "Everything's for sale at the right price," Brandon replied, that smile never wavering. "We've already had preliminary conversations with Harvest Home Publishing. They're very interested. We're talking about a substantial offer, Potentially $500,000 for the rights to your sourdough recipes and the Dawson name. $500,000. The number hung in the air like smoke. That kind of money could change my life, secure my retirement, maybe even let me travel like Robert and I had always planned. "Why are you telling me this and not the publisher?" I asked. Emily stood up, smoothing her expensive-looking dress. "Because Aunt Margaret, we're family. Brandon and I want to help you. You're getting older. The bakery is a lot of work, and honestly, we're worried about you. We think it's time to consider your options." "My options?" "Selling the business," Brandon said smoothly. "Retiring. Enjoying your golden years instead of waking up at 4 in the morning to knead dough. Emily's told me how hard you've been working, especially since Robert passed. It's not sustainable." I looked at my niece. Really looked at her, and saw nothing of the little girl who used to help me frost cookies every Christmas. This was someone else entirely. Someone calculating and cold. "Get out of my bakery," I said quietly. "Aunt Margaret, don't be hasty," Emily started, but I cut her off. I said, "Get out, and leave my journals here." Brandon's smile finally faded. "Mrs. Dawson, we're trying to help you. The publishing deal won't wait forever. These opportunities have a shelf life. So does my patience. Out. Now." They left, but not before Emily turned at the door. "We'll be back, Aunt Margaret. Dad agrees that you need help making these decisions. We're just looking out for you." The threat was clear. After they left, I sat at my desk, hands shaking, surrounded by the journals that contained not just recipes but memories. Robert's notes in the margins. "Margaret says add more salt. She's always right." My grandmother's original handwriting from the 1,950 seconds. Decades of our lives in these pages. I called my brother that night. David answered on the 4th ring, his voice distant and distracted as always. "Did you give Emily a key to my bakery?" I asked without preamble. There was a long pause. "Margaret, she told me you'd be upset. Look, she's worried about you. We both are. You're alone up there, working yourself to death in that bakery. At your age, it's time to think about slowing down." "At my age?" I repeated, feeling anger rise in my throat. "I'm 65, David, not 90. And I'll decide when it's time to slow down. Not you, and certainly not Emily, who I haven't heard from in years, until suddenly she shows up with some slick boyfriend talking about publishing deals." "Brandon's her fiancé," David corrected. "He's in the industry, Margaret. He knows what he's talking about. $500,000 for those recipes could set you up for life. You could sell the bakery, move somewhere easier, maybe one of those nice retirement communities." "I don't want a retirement community. I want my bakery. The one Robert and I built." "Robert's gone," David said, and his words hit like a slap. "I know you miss him, but clinging to that building isn't bringing him back. Emily's trying to help you move on. By stealing my recipes and pressuring me to sell? That's dramatic. She's trying to help you see reason. We all are. In fact, I've asked her to check in on you regularly. Make sure you're eating right, keeping up with the business properly. You know how you can get, Margaret. Stubborn. Robert used to complain about it all the time. That was a lie. Robert had loved my determination, called it one of my best qualities. The fact that David would use my dead husband against me made me realize how serious this was. I hung up and sat in the empty apartment, listening to the old buildings settle around me. Then I did what Robert would have wanted. I called a lawyer. Linda Chen's office was in the next town over, but her reputation stretched across the county. A friend from the farmer's market had used her for an estate dispute and spoke highly of her sharp mind and sharper tongue. Monday morning, I sat in her modern office, completely different from my flour-dusted bakery, and told her everything. "Do you have a will?" Linda asked, taking notes on her tablet. "Yes, from when Robert was alive. Everything goes to David since he's my only living relative." Linda's expression sharpened. "And does David know about the potential publishing deal?" Emily must have told him. He mentioned the $500,000 on the phone. "Mrs. Dawson, I need you to understand something. What Emily and her fiancé are doing could constitute elder financial exploitation, especially if they're trying to pressure you into signing contracts. The fact that they accessed your private business documents without permission is also concerning. But Emily had a key, given to her without your knowledge or consent. That's still unauthorized entry. Linda leaned forward. How much do you know about this Brandon Mitchell? Nothing. I'd never heard of him until Saturday. Linda made a note. I'll look into him. In the meantime, we need to protect your assets immediately. First, change every lock on your property. Second, I want you to establish a trust for the bakery and your intellectual property, those recipes. Third, we're going to update your will with very specific language about undue influence. Is all this really necessary? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Mrs. Dawson, your niece showed up after years of no contact, immediately after someone expressed interest in buying your recipes for $500,000. She has a key you didn't give her. She's been photographing your private journals, and your brother is openly supporting her actions. Yes, this is absolutely necessary. The next week was a blur of legal paperwork and precautions. I changed every lock, installed security cameras at Linda's insistence, and watched as she set up an irrevocable trust that would protect my recipes and the bakery. The intellectual property, Linda explained, was worth far more than just the recipes themselves. It was the Dawson name, the reputation, the decades of goodwill in the community. If that publishing deal is real, Linda said, you could negotiate it yourself and put the money in the trust. But we need to verify everything first. Brandon Mitchell's story doesn't sit right with me. She was right to be suspicious. 2 days later, Linda called me at the bakery just after the morning rush. Margaret, Brandon Mitchell doesn't work for any major publishing house. He's a freelance literary agent, but his license lapsed last year. And get this, he has a history of targeting small business owners, convincing them to sign over intellectual property rights, then selling those rights to larger companies for a significant markup. My stomach dropped. So, the publishing deal? Might be real, but if it is, Brandon's planning to cut you out of most of the profits. The contract Emily had you look at, did you read it carefully? She didn't show me a contract, just talked about the idea. Smart. They're probably waiting to present you with papers when you're vulnerable or confused. Margaret, I did some more digging. Your niece has significant credit card debt, about $80,000 worth. And she quit her job in Portland 3 months ago. Everything clicked into place. Emily wasn't here to help me. She was desperate, and she saw my bakery, my recipes, and my age as an opportunity. That evening, I was closing up when Emily appeared at the door. Alone this time, without Brandon. She looked tired, less polished than during her first visit. Aunt Margaret, can we talk? She asked through the glass. Against my better judgment, I let her in. We sat at one of the cafe tables, the smell of the day's baking still hanging in the air. I owe you an apology, Emily began, and for a moment, I almost believed her. I shouldn't have gone through your things without asking. It was disrespectful. Yes, it was. But Aunt Margaret, I meant what I said about the publishing deal. It's real. Brandon has connections. He knows people. This could be life-changing money for you. For both of us, actually. I was hoping we could go into this together, as a family project. Emily, how much debt are you in? Her face went pale, then flushed. I don't know what you're talking about. $80,000. And you lost your job. Is that why you're really here? Not to help me, but to help yourself? She stood up abruptly. Who told you that? Have you been investigating me? That's paranoid, Aunt Margaret. Honestly, this is exactly what Dad was worried about. You're not thinking clearly anymore. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. Clear enough to know that you and Brandon are trying to manipulate me. We're trying to help you. Emily's voice rose. You're 65 years old, running a failing bakery in a dying town. This is your chance to get out with something, but you're too stubborn to see it, just like you were too stubborn to let Uncle Robert slow down before his heart gave out. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. But they also showed me exactly who my niece had become. Get out of my bakery, Emily, and don't come back. You're making a mistake, she said, grabbing her purse. Dad's already concerned about your mental state. We've been documenting things. The way you forget to lock doors, leave ovens on, mix up orders, we have witnesses. That's a lie. Is it? Mrs. Patterson from the market mentioned you seemed confused last month. Old Mr. Chen said you gave him the wrong change twice. We're building a case, Aunt Margaret. For your own protection, we're going to prove you can't handle this business anymore. After she left, I sat in the dark bakery, shaking. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. Everything Linda had warned me about was coming true. I called Linda immediately. She listened calmly as I recounted the conversation, then said, "Tomorrow, we're getting you evaluated by a geriatric specialist and a forensic psychologist. We need official documentation that you're in perfect mental health. And Margaret, from now on, record every interaction with Emily or your brother. Oregon is a one-party consent state." The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to doctor's appointments, underwent cognitive tests, and answered questions about my daily life. Both the doctor and psychologist concluded the same thing. I was in excellent mental health for any age, let alone 65. "Your cognitive function is actually above average," the psychologist told me. "You're sharp, capable, and fully competent to manage complex business decisions. There's no evidence of any decline whatsoever." Armed with these reports, Linda and I prepared for what we knew was coming. We didn't have to wait long. David called 3 days later. "Margaret, I'm coming up this weekend with Emily and Brandon. We need to have a family meeting about your situation." "My situation is fine, David." "That's not what I've been hearing." Emily's worried. "I'm worried. We think it's time to discuss some changes, maybe getting you some help with the bakery or considering other options." "I don't need help." "Margaret, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're family. We just want what's best for you." When I told Linda about the call, she smiled grimly. "Perfect. Let them come. Make sure your recording app is ready." Saturday arrived cold and gray. Typical Oregon autumn weather. David, Emily, and Brandon showed up at noon, just after I'd closed the bakery for the day. I let them upstairs to my apartment, my phone recording in my cardigan pocket. David hugged me, but it felt perfunctory. Emily smiled her fake smile. Brandon looked around the apartment like he was appraising real estate. "Margaret, thanks for seeing us," David began, sitting on my sofa like he owned it. "We wanted to talk to you about some concerns we have." "I'm listening." Brandon pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Dawson, we've prepared some documents for you to review. The publishing deal I mentioned is real and time-sensitive. Harvest Home Publishing is prepared to offer $400,000 for your sourdough recipes and the rights to use the Dawson name on a line of products." "$400,000?" I asked. "Last time you said $500,000. He didn't miss a beat. Market fluctuations. But $400,000 is still substantial. However, the offer expires in 2 weeks. They need a decision. "And these documents?" "A contract signing over the intellectual property rights to your recipes. In exchange, you receive the $400,000, minus our consulting fee, of course." "How much is your consulting fee?" 20%, standard in the industry. $80,000, exactly the amount of Emily's debt. "And what about the bakery itself?" I asked. David leaned forward. "Margaret, I know this is hard to hear, but Emily and I think it's time to consider selling the building too. You could take the money from both sales, close to $600,000 total, and really enjoy your retirement. Maybe move closer to me in Seattle. We could see each other more often. After 38 years of not seeing each other much at all, you suddenly want me nearby? That's not fair, Margaret. I've been busy with my own life, but I've always cared about you. And now that Robert's gone, you need family, you need support." Emily added, "We've already talked to a commercial real estate agent. This building could sell for at least $200,000, maybe more. The Main Street location is prime real estate. And you've done all this without talking to me first?" "We wanted to have all the information before we approached you," Brandon said smoothly. "Make this as easy as possible." I looked at the three of them, and suddenly I'd had enough. The answer is no, to all of it. I'm not selling my recipes, I'm not selling my bakery, and I'm not signing anything. David's expression hardened. "Margaret, be reasonable. At your age, you can't keep up this pace forever. The bakery is too much for one person. Then I'll hire help. But I'm not selling." "You're not thinking clearly," Emily said, her voice taking on that concerned tone that made my skin crawl. "Aunt Margaret, we've noticed some changes in you. Forgetting things, getting confused. It's okay. It happens as we age, but it means you need help making these big decisions." "I'm not confused about anything." Brandon stood up. "Mrs. Dawson, I need to be honest with you. If you don't sign these documents voluntarily, we're prepared to pursue other legal options. Your family is concerned about your capacity to handle your affairs." We have statements from people who've noticed concerning behavior. Statements from whom? Mrs. Patterson mentioned you seemed disoriented at the farmer's market. Mr. Chen said you've been making errors with money. Your pastor noted you've been missing Sunday services, which is unlike you. Every single one was a lie or a distortion. I'd been perfectly fine at the market. Mr. Chen's supposed complaint never happened, and I'd been attending church regularly. You're building a false case against me, I said quietly. We're protecting you, David insisted. Margaret, if you can't see that you need help, then we'll have to get a court to see it. We can petition for guardianship. Have you evaluated by doctors who will confirm what we already know, that you're no longer capable of managing a business? That's when I smiled. Actually, I've already been evaluated by a geriatric specialist and a forensic psychologist. Both concluded I'm in perfect mental health. I have the documentation right here. I pulled out the reports Linda had prepared for me. David's face went white as he read them. You've been planning this, Emily accused. You've been working against your own family. I've been protecting myself from people trying to exploit me. There's a difference. Brandon's mask finally slipped. Listen, old woman, this deal is happening whether you like it or not. We've already started negotiations with the publisher. We have photographs of all your recipes. You can either get paid for them, or we'll sell them anyway and you'll get nothing. That would be theft of intellectual property. And I have video of you just now threatening me. This entire conversation has been recorded. The silence that followed was deafening. You recorded us? David finally asked. Your own brother? Oregon is a one-party consent state. I only needed my permission. And yes, I recorded 3 family members trying to pressure me into signing over my life's work and threatening me with false incompetency claims. Linda had coached me well. I stood up, still calm despite my racing heart. I think you should all leave now. And if you try to sell my recipes, if you file any guardianship petitions, or if you spread any more lies about my mental health, I will pursue legal action for elder exploitation, defamation, and theft. My lawyer has copies of everything, including Brandon's history of scamming small business owners. Brandon's face went red. You had me investigated? Due diligence. Something you should understand, being in business. They left in a fury of threats and accusations, but I knew I'd won this round. After they were gone, I sat in my apartment, shaking with adrenaline and grief. My own brother, my own niece. They'd been willing to lie, manipulate, and destroy my reputation just for money. Linda filed a restraining order on Monday, preventing Emily and Brandon from coming within 500 feet of my bakery or home. We also sent a cease and desist letter to David, warning him that any further attempts to interfere with my business would result in legal action. The response came 3 days later. David's lawyer, because of course he'd hired one, sent a letter claiming that I was being unduly influenced by Linda, that my sudden legal actions were evidence of my deteriorating judgment, and that they would be moving forward with guardianship proceedings for my protection. Let them try, Linda said when I called her in a panic. We have medical evidence, witness testimony from your regular customers about how sharp you are, and recordings of their threats. Plus, I've been in contact with Harvest Home Publishing. Want to know something interesting? What? They never contacted Brandon Mitchell. He contacted them, claiming to represent you. When they expressed interest, he inflated the offer and planned to pocket the difference. The actual offer was $200,000, not $400,000 or $500,000. Brandon was planning to scam everyone. You, Emily, and the publisher. Does Emily know? I doubt it. She probably thinks she's getting $80,000 to pay off her debts. She doesn't know her fiancé was planning to take most of the money and run. I almost felt sorry for my niece. Almost. The guardianship hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Those were the longest 6 weeks of my life. I continued running the bakery, but every customer interaction felt fraught. Were they watching me for signs of incompetence? Would someone claim I seemed confused? I became hyper-aware of every small mistake, every forgotten detail. Linda prepared our case meticulously. We had the medical evaluations, character witnesses from the community, financial records showing I'd been managing the bakery successfully for decades, and the recordings of Emily and Brandon's threats. The day of the hearing, I wore my best dress and sat in the courtroom trying not to shake. David was there with his lawyer, looking grim. Emily sat beside him, pale and thin. Brandon was notably absent. David's lawyer presented their case. I was a widow, living alone, working too hard for my age, showing signs of confusion and poor judgment. They called Mrs. Patterson to the stand, but under oath, she admitted Emily had coached her on what to say. Mr. Chen's testimony fell apart when Linda showed he'd been paid $500 by Brandon to lie. Then Linda presented our evidence. The medical reports, the recordings, testimony from my banker, my supplier, the mayor who'd known me for 30 years. They painted a picture of a sharp, capable woman being targeted by greedy relatives. The judge, a woman in her 60s herself, listened to everything with a stone face. When both sides rested, she didn't hesitate. Petition denied. Mrs. Dawson is clearly competent to manage her own affairs. Furthermore, I'm troubled by the evidence of manipulation presented here. I'm ordering a full investigation into possible elder exploitation. I cried in the courtroom, not from joy, exactly, but from relief and exhaustion. Outside, David approached me while Emily waited by the car. "Margaret, I never meant for it to go this far. Didn't you? You gave Emily a key to my bakery without asking. You supported her lies. You tried to have me declared incompetent. I thought we were helping you. I thought you needed us. What I needed was family who respected me. What I got were vultures. That's harsh. It's honest. Goodbye, David. I haven't spoken to my brother since." Emily called once, a week after the hearing, crying and apologizing. Brandon had disappeared with the money they'd gotten from Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Chen, along with Emily's credit cards and what was left in her checking account. She'd lost everything and wanted to know if I'd help her. I said no. Some people called me cruel for that, but I'd learned my lesson about helping people who only wanted to use me. The bakery is still running, stronger than ever, actually. The publicity from the court case brought in new customers curious about the recipes people had tried to steal. I hired 2 part-time employees, both young women who remind me of what Emily could have been if she'd chosen differently. I did eventually work out a deal directly with Harvest Home Publishing. They bought the rights to publish a cookbook featuring my grandmother's and my recipes for $250,000. The money went into a trust that will support the bakery's operations and eventually fund a scholarship for culinary students. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I'd just signed those papers. Would Emily have been satisfied? Would Brandon have disappeared anyway? Would I have lost not just my business but my sense of self? I think the answer is yes to all of those questions. Robert used to say that the secret to good bread was knowing when to push and when to let rise. The same is true for life. I pushed back when I needed to, protected what mattered, and now I'm letting things rise naturally, without force or manipulation. My life isn't perfect. I'm still alone most nights, still miss my husband with an ache that never quite fades. But I have my bakery, my independence, and the satisfaction of knowing I fought for what was mine and won. The recipe journals sit in a safety deposit box now, along with copies of all the legal documents. The originals stay with me, upstairs in the apartment, where I sometimes open them late at night and trace Robert's handwriting with my finger. These pages aren't just recipes. They're a lifetime of love and work and stubborn determination. They're worth more than any amount of money, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take them from me. That's my story. If it resonated with you, if you learned something or felt something, please subscribe to Twisted MNT Stories. Your support helps me share these experiences, helps other people know they're not alone when family turns against them. And remember, you're never too old to fight for what's yours. Never too old to demand respect. Never too old to recognize when someone's trying to take advantage of you. Stand your ground, protect what you've built, and don't ever let anyone convince you that age makes you less capable of defending yourself. Thank you for listening.